you. Aaron, roll call one more time, please.
Absolutely. President Lee,
Here.
Vice President Close, Superintendent Hoffman,
Here.
Dr. Crockett,
Present.
Mr. Mason, present, Ms. Rice,
Here.
Mr. Stratton, present, Mr. Swanson, here. President Lee, you have a quorum.
Awesome, thank you. Just a quick happy birthday to Arizona. So just wanted to give a shout out to Arizona today. Before we get started, also, I'd like to move an agenda item. I'm gonna go ahead and, if we can, move the agenda items F, H, J, K, and L1 to be considered first for the board's discussion and consideration. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Aaron, roll call, please.
Vice President Close,
Aye.
Superintendent Hoffman,
Aye.
Dr. Crockett,
Aye.
Mr. Mason,
Aye.
Ms. Rice,
Aye.
Mr. Stratton,
Aye.
Mr. Swanson,
Aye.
President Lee.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously.
Great, thank you. I just wanted to make sure we took the financial items first, because some of the members might have to. So, okay, up next, welcome back. Your first superintendent's report with us.
Are we?
No.
Oh, you would start it.
Later.
Sorry,
Oh,
I thought I did. I know what I'm doing. All right, just kidding. All right, that was practice run. You're welcome. All right, call to the public. We do have one person who is online. And Wade Ferguson, if you are still with us, you can unmute yourself at this time, state your name for the record, and you have 2 minutes to speak.
Thank you. I am still with you. I hung in there through all the technical difficulties, so congratulations on fixing that. I represent BOKF, who is counsel, or I'm sorry, as counsel for BOKF, is the successor trustee under the indenture of trust dated 9/1/2011. That's the indenture for the Fountain Hills Charter School. I just wanted to let the board know there's been apparently some concern recently, including on the part of my client and our receiver, about the status of the student information and student records from Fountain Hills Charter School. The receiver was appointed by the Pima County Court, I think it was on June 3rd, 2021. The purpose of the receivership was to liquidate the collateral that secures the repayment of the underlying debt. That collateral in particular is limited to the personal property of the school itself and the real property. The Fountain Hills Charter School is the borrower under that financial arrangement. The receiver is actually an officer of the court appointed by the court. The purpose of the receivership, once completed, that being the liquidation of collateral, the receiver will actually be terminated by the court and will no longer be a functioning entity or an officer of the court. The Fountain Hills Charter School was operated or managed, I believe, by the Charter Management Group, LLC, the principals of which are Douglas Pike and Bill Zeleny. I believe that the Charter Management Group also manages another charter school, Parkview Charter School, which is a matter also before the board today. Specifically, the issue we have right now is the receiver is in possession of approximately 16 boxes of student records. I understand that back in June of 2021, shortly after the receiver's appointment, Mr. Pike did in fact take possession of some of the student records, but not all of it. So we still have the 16 boxes left over, or approximately 16 boxes left over. I also understand the receiver's office has been in contact with Mr. Pike, spoke with him recently, and has emailed both Mr. Pike and Mr. Zeleny, to get them to pick up the remaining student records. What we really need to do is have Mr. Pike or Mr. Zeleny pick up the student information, which I understand they can take to the Arizona State Board for Charter Schools, deposit those records with the State Board for Charter Schools. They will need to complete an attestation. The problem the receiver has is that it doesn't have the authority under the court's receivership order to hold and maintain the student records, and certainly would not be in a position to complete that attestation. I understand under the records retention schedule, at least some of the student records have to be maintained for approximately 4 years. Others are permanent records that need to be maintained, given the receiver is really a temporary role for the court and for BOKF is not in a position to act as the recipient or retention agent for those records. So that's really all I wanted to bring to the court's attention. I thought this might be a good time to do so, in that I believe, or I understand that Mr. Pike or Mr. Zeleny may be addressing the board on a different matter today. And if there are any questions, I'm happy to answer those, but that's all I have for a presentation today. I would like to thank the board for allowing me an opportunity to speak.
Great, thank you, Mr. Ferguson. We actually can't ask you any questions, so we won't, but thank you so much for the public comment as it pertains to that agenda item. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks. All right. And there was no other written public comment received. And so we will move on to agenda item H, the consent agenda. Mr. Stratton, would you just like to recuse yourself from the entire consent agenda?
I'll recuse myself from the entire consent agenda, but specifically item number 3 with respect to Tom Hills Charter School Board. My law firm and I have previously represented that.
Great, thank you. So we don't have to make a motion, right? You just recuse yourself. Thanks. For those who can't see, he's walking away and recusing himself. Okay.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. Perfect. Board members, are there anything you'd like to remove from the consent agenda? And if not, is there a motion?
I will to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Aaron, with the roll call, please.
Vice President Close,
Aye.
Superintendent Hoffman,
Aye.
Dr. Crockett, Mr. Mason.
Aye.
Ms. Rice,
Aye.
Mr. Swanson,
Aye.
President Lee.
Aye.
Motion passes.
And thank you. Thank you. Okay, we are going to move on to agenda item J, but I'm going to just let Aaron deal. Okay, thank you. Let Tim come back in. Okay, so we have Andrea. Will you just give us? Yep, perfect. Okay, go for it.
President Lee, Superintendent Hoffman, members of the board. Under the board's financial performance framework, staff annually assigns each charter holder a summative financial performance rating of either good standing, adequate standing, or intervention. A charter holder that receives an intervention rating for 2 or more consecutive years is placed on probation and does not meet the board's financial performance expectations. Staff assigns each on probation charter holder a probation risk level using the charter holder's financial results based on the 2 most recent audits and the criteria set forth in the board's rules. The board has established 3 probation risk levels: probation risk level 1, which represents the highest risk, probation risk level 2, and probation risk level 3. The board's rules require staff to report to the board at a public meeting 2 items. First, the probation risk level assigned to each on probation charter holder, and second, the detail underlying the probation risk level determination for each charter assigned to probation risk level 1. This information has been included in the materials for this agenda item. As of today, staff has completed their review of 255 of the expected 412 fiscal year 21 audits and has identified 15 charter holders as on probation. Of these 15, 4 were assigned to level 1, 4 were assigned to level 2, and 7 were assigned to level 3. Once the remaining fiscal year 21 single audits have been received and reviewed, it may be necessary for staff to provide another report to the board. I'm available for questions.
Board members, are there any questions for Andrea? No, I just wanted to say, great work on this. It was really, really technical and really difficult. So I appreciate all you guys did to do this.
It's definitely a team effort.
Yeah. Great. Is that it for K?
Yes.
Okay, so to make sure we picture up. Awesome. Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and move on to agenda item K, the financial performance consent agreements.
Under the board's rules, a charter holder assigned to probation risk level 1, which represents the highest risk, is subject to a consent agreement with the board, charter revocation proceedings, or if applicable, denial of renewal. In consultation with the board's legal counsel, staff has developed a proposed financial performance consent agreement for board consideration. This agreement would be used when the board decides to offer a consent agreement to a probation risk level 1 charter holder rather than proceed to revocation. Similar to the agreement used by the board when schools are assigned a letter grade of F, identical standard terms and conditions will apply to each charter holder offered the financial performance consent agreement. The proposed agreement covers 3 years. For a charter holder assigned to a probation risk level, for a charter holder assigned to probation risk level 1, following the review of the fiscal year 21 audit, the agreement will cover the financial dashboards for fiscal years 22, 23, and 24. Because the student count data and annual audit used to create the financial dashboard are not available until after the fiscal year concludes, the school years covered by the agreement would be fiscal years 23, 24, and 25. For the consent agreement's first year, the charter holder must be assigned a good standing or adequate standing rating, except that the charter holder may be assigned an intervention rating and placed on probation so long as the charter holder is assigned to probation risk level 3, which represents the lowest risk. In the other 2 years, the charter holder must be assigned a good standing or adequate standing rating. If a charter is offered and the charter holder's board approves the consent agreement, staff asks the board to authorize the board president to sign the agreement without the agreement being brought before the board at a subsequent regular meeting. I'm available for questions.
Board members, are there any questions? Please.
So just in reading this, thank you, this is good. So this is a new type of consent agreement,
Correct.
strictly related to financial, not the academic performance stuff. So do you have an idea how many of the, like, will the volume of consent agreements go up significantly? Is this kind of relates to what we saw on J?
Yeah, it does relate in some degree to what we saw on J. I think in this first year, it'll probably be a small number. In the rules that you developed going forward, so beginning with the 22 audit and going out from there, charter holders who are assigned to one of the other probation risk levels for 2 years automatically end up in probation risk level 1. So I'm not sure where we'll end up with that, but when that occurs, there could be a slight increase, but I don't expect a large percentage of the portfolio to be subject to this agreement, if that answers your question.
It does.
And the timeline of the agreement being 3 years, that's all in the same alignment with our currently what we do with the consent agreements for academic
And operational.
operational base.
That's correct.
Board members, any other questions? If that, then is there a motion, please?
I move that the board adopt the financial performance consent agreement as presented to the board today and found in the materials for today's board meeting, and authorize the board president to sign financial performance consent agreements executed by charter holders without the agreements being brought before the entire board for approval at a subsequent meeting.
Is there, thank you. No, that was perfect. Roll call, please.
Vice President Close,
Aye.
Superintendent Hoffman.
Aye.
Dr. Crockett,
Aye.
Mr. Mason.
Aye.
Ms. Rice,
Aye.
Mr. Stratton. Aye. Mr. Swanson.
It's gonna be an aye, but I just want to comment, this is really good. As far as holding charter schools accountable and making a statement that these are, that running schools are complicated and they're just not about, it's about operations, it's about the academics, and it's about the financial side. And we have an awful lot of money, state money that goes to these schools that we're all responsible for. So I think this is a really good improvement. So aye, thank you.
President Lee.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously.
Okay, up next, we're gonna just do L1 and compliance matters, and Andrea. Oh,
I also need to recuse myself
Yep.
from this matter.
thank you. Okay, perfect.
Culminating in July of 2019, the board overhauled its financial framework to focus the board's efforts and attention on the most financially at-risk charter holders. Changes made to the measures and overall ratings better targeted and identified those charter holders exhibiting possible signs of financial stress. The intervention process provided opportunities for the board to reassess each charter holder identified for intervention. In April 2021, the board added 3 probation risk levels to its financial framework to allow for consideration of the charter holder's specific financial situation and to promote transparency in the board's decision-making process. Probation risk level 1 identifies the highest risk. Pursuant to the board's rules, a charter holder assigned to probation risk level 1 is subject to a consent agreement with the board, charter revocation proceedings, or if applicable, denial of renewal. Today's meeting marks the first time the board will consider charter holders assigned to probation risk level 1. Based on the fiscal year 21 audits received and reviewed by staff, so far, 4 charter holders have been assigned to probation risk level 1. These 4 include 3 that will be surrendering their charter contracts at the end of this school year, and 1 that is on today's agenda for board consideration. Parkview School, Inc. operates 2 schools in Prescott Valley, which combined serve grades 6 through 12. The charter holder received an intervention rating for fiscal year 2020 and for fiscal year 2021. Using the criteria identified in the board's rules, staff assigned the charter holder to probation risk level 1 because the charter holder's performance aligned with 2 of the scenarios specified by the board in its rules. The first scenario applied because 1, the charter holder received a below standard rating on the going concern measure for 2 consecutive fiscal years. This means in each fiscal year, substantial doubt about the charter holder's ability to continue operating was raised in the audit. 2, the charter holder was determined to fall within the moderate risk ADM category. And 3, the charter holder's numeric performance positively increased on less than 3 calculated measures. Specifically, from fiscal year 2020 to fiscal year 2021, the charter holder's numeric performance on the unrestricted days liquidity measure declined from a meet standard to an approaches standard. The charter holder's numeric performance on the adjusted net income measure declined and remained rated below standard. And the charter holder's numeric performance on the lease adjusted debt service coverage ratio positively increased, but remained negative and rated below standard. The second scenario applied because the fiscal year 21 audit disclosed that the charter holder was in default due to not making required payments on its bond debt. As a result of this audit disclosure, the charter holder was determined to fall within the high risk default measure category under the board's rules. In June 2021, a court order was issued appointing a receiver for the school's collateral. The charter holder is contesting the receivership and has initiated legal action to prevent continued action of the bond trustee. Staff was informed that a status conference concerning the receivership was scheduled to occur this past Friday on February 11th. The current litigation involving the charter holder and bond trustee do not preclude the board from acting today under its financial framework and rules to enter into a consent agreement with the charter holder or to issue a notice of intent to revoke the charter holder's charter contract. I'm available for questions. The charter representative is also available here in person. And it is my understanding that representatives for the bond trustee and receiver are also participating virtually in today's meeting should the board members have questions for that.
Thank you. Board members, are there any questions for Andrea? Okay, if not, then, oh,
President Lee,
Yeah.
can we get back to Andrea if we need to?
absolutely. Yeah, I have a feeling don't go too far. All right, with that then, is the charter holder here? If so, would you like to come up, state your name for the record, and any statement you'd like to make?
President, members of the board, thank you. My name is Doug Pike. I am the president of Parkview School, Inc., the charter holder. It is disappointing to be here. I requested that this item not be on the agenda. I believe that it is inappropriate for an item with facts in litigation to be heard. I believe it's inappropriate to place yourself in between the litigants. It is further quite disappointing for staff to allow a letter from one side of the litigants to be included in your packet without seeking rebuttal from the other side of the litigants. I'm grateful that the court allows my attorney to provide rebuttals. It's disappointing and inappropriate to see falsehoods distributed to you in your packet. It's inappropriate to allow yourself to be used by a creditor to attempt an end run around the rulings of the court. For your agenda, the item before you has to do with our financial dashboard. The facts leading to those measures are in dispute and before a court, actually before two courts. Specifically, we are not in default. Specifically, the bank has wrongfully ignored the will and the lawful vote of the bondholders, withheld funds from the school, and sought our closure. We've enjoyed a robust increase in our enrollment, with over 160 students since October. The bondholders want the school to remain open. I ask that you table this item, I would say for at least 4 months. If we are ruled against in that time, the school will close. If we win, we'll work with Andrea to come present our actual financial condition, which will change the financial dashboard. If you seek not to table this, I would ask that you enter into the consent agreement with us, which I believe, based on the rulings I expect, will be met. Thank you.
I just want to ask a clarifying question for Andrew or Ash, whoever can answer this. If we were to set aside the default issue, would the school still be up here today and qualify for, to be here for tier 1, level 1?
Yes, they would. There were 2 scenarios. The board has established 6 scenarios that fall into probation risk level 1. The charter holder's performance fell into 2 of those. One of those scenarios solely looks at performance on the default measure.
Okay.
But the other scenario was the one I went over where they had the 2 years of the going concern, the moderate ADM, and then the declining performance. The scenario is defined as increased performance on less than 3. In this particular case, it was increased performance on one measure, declining performance on the other 2 calculated measures.
Perfect. I just wanted to make sure. Thank you, Andrea. Okay, board members, are there any questions?
Presently,
Yes,
I have a comment.
please.
I don't think it's appropriate to tell the board that we're being manipulated or used by anybody for any purpose at all. I don't appreciate that. I don't think that that's how we did not take it that way at all. But when I read the stuff, but when I heard you say that, I don't appreciate that because we're not being manipulated or used.
Madam President, I appreciate Member Swanson's opinion. I also have my opinion. I also have the word from my attorneys as to what is occurring and what is being done. I appreciate Andrea's work. She's technical and detailed, and she does good work. I believe that we would have the opportunity to present numbers that show increases. I also believe that when falsehoods are presented to the board, it needs to be pointed out.
Going along those lines, I actually have a question for you then, because I agree in very transparent communication, especially in front of the board. In your statement, you talked about increasing enrollment.
Yes,
And that is, so I guess, and maybe I'm a little confused. So on page 4, I do see increasing enrollment, but it's my understanding that 91% of those funds go to Lumos and not to you, of those students that have increased enrollment. So how many students are not attending the micro school and actually attending your school that are increasing in enrollment?
I believe the micro school sits at about 40 of those 165 students that we have. ADM differs from current enrollment, but the numbers have increased in actual on-site students. Not all of the students that are not at Lumos are attending. There are parents that have opted due to COVID reasons not to have their children in school, and we serve those children also.
Okay, so because the ADM increase is only 36.65. What grade levels do you serve?
6 through 12.
6 through 12. So that's a really big discrepancy between ADM and student enrollment. Obviously, I know that there's typically a discrepancy, especially in elementaries, because kinders are counted as 0.5, et cetera, et cetera. So your claim is that there's 140 and that it's because ADM is 36.65 and then
No,
40 of them went to Lumos.
There's over 160 students and has been since
Total,
October.
160 students total.
Total.
Right, but when we talk about increase, so FY21 is 113,
Mhm.
FY22 is 149 approximately, which is an increase of 36. And your statement was that you had a robust increase.
We did.
So that's 36 ADM of an increase,
30, well,
right? So
So-
if, and 40 of those students, so did almost all of those students have an increase attend Lumos?
no, that's
So
exactly what I'm
what
saying.
percent of the increase attend Lumos? I just have a hard time with you accusing the board of being manipulated and then coming up here and telling us you have a robust increase and almost all of those students go to Lumos where you receive 9% of the funding of that. Is that accurate? You receive 9% of the funding of the students who go to Lumos?
Students,
Approximately.
approximately, yes, that's true.
All right.
I think you understand that schools operate on a small margin and 9% of a student's funds, which are going to the bottom line, is not an insignificant amount of funds. It is not inappropriate for the schools to serve these micro schools, and the law allows it, and the school takes advantage of the financial condition that has improved not only for the employees, but for the supplies of the school. The numbers, our accountant has been on the line with ADE on a monthly basis. On a monthly basis, ADE has improved and increased the ADM numbers as they go back and redo things. It's a big computer system. It's a big computer system that uses a lot of work.
Sure.
And I'm not telling you that the ADM numbers that you've been reported by your staff are incorrect. I am telling what the enrollment numbers are and have been.
Okay. Out of the 9%, how much goes to the charter management company and how much goes into the school?
0 of that 9% goes to the charter management company.
I'm having a hard time. I'm having a really hard time right now to come up and kind of accuse the board of things and then for you to not, you can kind of do what you're accusing of, to be really not transparent with your numbers. Because I would argue a robust increase to a micro school. We have no issue with a micro school. That's great, but that's not funds that are coming into you, into your school that would help attribute to a better financial performance. So that's why those questions are being asked. So that wouldn't put you in a better spot necessarily to get 9% of 36 students.
Those are,
Doesn't greatly increase your financial.
those are fine questions. I'm not accusing the board of being manipulated. I'm accusing the board, and accusing is a word that I didn't select. Okay, but it's been put into the conversation for whatever reason. The facts.
I mean, to be clear, because of your opening statement, saying that we've been manipulated. So the accusation was that you came up. Okay.
Madam President, I did not use the word manipulated, not once. Okay, I said that the facts are before a court of law. It is extremely valid for one of these other attorneys to come before you and say and agree with me, the facts are in dispute, and for him to say his side. The court of law has taken that on. The appeals court of the state of Arizona has accepted our appeal. I'm not saying we're going to win that. I'm saying that's where it is. I'm saying it's moved through that process for many months, and I expect it to be concluded. I'm asking that you step back and allow that to occur. I don't think that's unfair. I am stating that you have a letter that was provided by your staff to you that has falsehoods in it. And I'm not happy about that. Not happy that my attorneys weren't contacted by your staff for a similar letter. I think that's appropriate when facts are in dispute and the staff decides to put the situation before you. That's their choice, not mine. So it's not inappropriate for me to come and stand before you and differ with those facts. Ashley has a very young look, but it's not inappropriate for me to say that my service in your chairs was before the birth of some of your staff members. I respect this board.
I'm gonna say talking about people's age is actually highly inappropriate, but
Madam
go
President,
ahead and please.
I'd like to take the conversation up a level of, I think, first of all, it wasn't a decision of staff. We have a financial framework. That's what landed you here. Bottom line, right? There's no denying that. It's not like staff said, well, this or that or this or that, and you randomly ended up because we reviewed your audit. You didn't comply with the financial framework. That's why you're up here, right? Is that correct?
Sir, Madam President, Mr. Mason, I believe that the staff advises you on the choices and that the staff has the option to ask you your preference in this particular case and to present to you whether or not it appears on the agenda. As board president, I believe that the consultations that I had with the staff members were close and were consultative, and the decisions were made. I am suggesting to you that that decision is before you now, whether to take this up and take an action. If it is your decision to enter into and to subject the school to a consent agreement, I have already stated that that is something that we will sign and agree to. And I can understand it under the terms of the dashboard and under the terms of the agreement. I've also stated that I believe with a court ruling that a consultation with your staff who is technical and will look at the numbers and do it, I believe it will change the dashboard and that we'll be able to come before you and have a more positive discussion.
I can certainly appreciate that findings of fact could indeed change the way numbers are presented. I can appreciate that. The reason for my question is this, and I don't want to drop back down to the level we were just at, but this board is charged with overseeing the financial performance of its schools for two big reasons. One is to ensure that we're not wasting the state's dollars, right?
I agree.
And two, to make sure that students and families are not left in the lurch when schools shut down.
Absolutely.
And when a bondholder, when the trustee of a bondholder is taking actions that are indicative under the financial framework to us that a school is failing and could be shut down, I believe that should be one of our number one prerogatives. And I don't think that there's any question about that. So that's why we're here. I'm not saying that we're going to find facts. We're not a fact finder here. But we are going to make a decision based on the framework we have that we went through months to establish in the subcommittee and then went through a rulemaking process. I don't, it seems to me that, and as a former member, I think you can understand why we have to review this today. And I hope that we can, I appreciate your position, especially, like I said, on the fact finding. But I want to make clear that I don't think the board should ever shy away from this situation, ever. Because our top two prerogatives for this board are being hit right now, right? Students, continuation of education, and the state's money.
Mr. Mason, I appreciate those comments and I support them. I believe that my comments noted that one, I was here to be accountable. Two, I was here to note that the dashboard may change. And I'm asking you to take that into part of your considerations. And three, I was here to note that falsehoods had been presented and that facts are in dispute. Thank you.
Do you have a plan to not, oh, go for it. Okay, do you have a plan to not be here before the board again? Because I just heard a lot about the litigation, facts might change, but what's your plan to not be here again if you do get on a consent agreement or whatever?
Well, the consent agreement actually does require me to work with staff members. And I believe that your rules would require that the change, if there's a change, be presented to you, whether that's on the consent agenda or not, would determine the requirement for me to be here. I need to be available to you as an accountability item. My plan, and I think my fervent wish, is that I not need to have to come back to discuss this again. But that's not up to me. You have stated your dashboard, you have stated your rules. I have stated where I believe will fall.
Have you done anything preemptively? So I know you'll work with staff if given a consent agreement, but have you done any, I mean, up until this point, what have you done to make sure?
I have spent 3 years preemptively working with the bondholders and specifically the trustee to avoid having this situation. The bondholders have supported us, continue to support us. The trustee is seeking our closure. The judge has ruled very clearly that he's not going to allow students to be faced with closed doors of coming to school. And we're appreciative of him having stated that. He has stated on the record that the purpose of the receiver is to operate the school. And so we have worked with the receiver and cooperated with them to do that. We wish to be out of all of this, to be out of default. The school has greatly increased its income and is well below budget in its current operations, has good funds on hand. We expect to continue that increase.
Yeah, I have a few questions.
Yep.
Mr. Pike, I'm not a lawyer, but is the primary argument is it the forbearance agreement, whether because the trustee did not ratify it? Is that?
That is actually not anymore the current argument. The current argument is that state law has now intervened in the dispute and invalidated the debt and the default. The statute, your attorney has been given the copy of, and I'm not an attorney. But the argument before the State Court of Appeals is that the notice of claim has invalidated the debt. So we've gone far enough in the dispute, which has been ongoing for multiple years now, that the agreement, I'm sorry, the word's not coming to me right now, that we had with the bondholders and the trustee is the forbearance agreement is no longer the point.
When I was looking at reading the audits for the 2 years that we had in our packet and related to the going concern and your plan to get out, virtually identical year over year, except there's one added bullet this year. And then when I read your letter, it talks about different things in there than it did in the audits on what your plan is. And then when I read the trustees or the receivers report, it also raises a lot of other questions about the viability. And while we do have a fiduciary duty to the taxpayers, I kind of have some concern about the kids and what's going to happen to them and what's the best way to deal with all of this as we go forward. From a financial perspective, assuming, if you look at the bond holder debt, I don't know if that's a hole you can ever dig out of. And if you're saying the question is that you're going to have the debt forgiven because of the notice of claim issue?
That is the approach that's currently being taken with the Court of Appeals, yes.
Also, you wrote a letter last November to the staff, I think.
Yes,
And it said your enrollment was like 235. And your ADM is saying something more like, 149. What's the difference?
I'd have to look at the letter in front of me. I'm sure I didn't say the enrollment was 235. I apologize for not having that letter memorized, but it was a financial plan submitted to Ms. Lader specifically as to the changes, and it primarily addressed our goals and our plan for increase. I could imagine that 235 is a reasonable statement of a goal.
And I'm rereading it. You were talking about 2 years prior to that.
Okay.
But the letter doesn't address at all an issue that President Lee brought up about, talking about the transparency thing that really, if you look at your bricks and mortar enrollment, it's really dropped again from fiscal year 21 to 22 without the online kids at the micro school. Is that correct?
I believe no, it's not correct. There is an increase in the brick and mortar enrollment. The reflection of numbers into ADM is, you have to be very specific in drawing lines between them. I believe, as I noted for President Lee, that that increase of revenue to the brick and mortar school is substantial, as stating that there's 9% going into that. The margin of operations for charter schools is a lot slimmer than 9%. And so taking on the working with the micro schools is a benefit financially to the school.
I found the part in the letter that, so it says in FY 18 and FY 19, this is what you wrote. The school saw a major improvement in its financial position as the school's enrollment increased from 169 to 235.
Correct.
So it did increase to 235.
In those fiscal years, yes, we did hit 235 as a peak. The pandemic and others, caused a great decline. We're not the only school in the state that saw a decline, and some schools saw significant declines, both districts and charters. Others improved, and they should be lauded for their improvement. But we believe that with our current standing of, it's been in the mid 160s. A few weeks ago, we hit 169, but I noted a week ago that we're back at 163. We are asked by the receiver to report our enrollment on a weekly basis, so I am very familiar with the numbers and how they have adjusted back and forth. The historical enrollment numbers for that Parkview school over the last 5 or 6 years has been that there's been a change out over the holidays and Christmas holidays that has always been interesting to see whether we ended up a little more or a little less. We ended up with more this time. But the numbers of enrollment has been in excess of 160 since late September or early October. We have worked with ADE on the ADM portion of that, and we've seen that creeping up a little bit.
President Lee.
please.
Mr. Spicer, you know, despite the dispute and all the stuff around there, you know, what actually gets my attention is the going concern from your auditors, right? Your can use a different one, but you're not profitable. From an accounting perspective, you're cash flow negative. And even without, I mean, you've made some interest payments, I believe, on the note, like 229,000, but it looks like there's 700,000 or so of interest that has been delayed, because the forbearance will just delay payment of that. So you're adding that on top of the bond. So your auditor has a concern, you know, and said there is a going concern issue, which in my view, you know, really requires the board to address that and deal with that issue and figure out how to protect the state and the kids, you know, make sure they've got a good path to go wherever they end up going or whatever happens. So, and 2 years in a row without having resolved this issue, because I believe there really isn't a resolution without something significant happening to the bond debt. So I get that is a fight that you guys are having, but the going concern and leaves a lot of questions in my mind about where we go with this.
Madam President, Mr. Swanson, my background is engineering, not accounting. Mr. Swanson, you're much more familiar with the term going concern. It's a discussion that through many years of working with auditors, I'm not sure I've ever been satisfied with the definitions and the discussion that they've given me, but that is their job and that is their call. To tell you that the school has cash on hand, which it does and has in these years, and to tell you that the forbearance agreement certainly made a significant difference in the ability of the school to operate financially are true statements and were things that were at the foremost of our work and effort. You are correct, specifically with the interest and the debt. If that is waived, then you also recognize the significant difference that makes to the ability of the school to operate and to survive. I believe you are correct in that the protection of the state is one of the items that you need to be mindful of. I believe I am comfortable with the statements of the judge that he will not allow the school to not operate and to put those funds to the use of the students while the receiver is in place. That is a decision that is before him on a regular basis. The bank has taken special action to request that the school be closed. He filed special action and there was a hearing in November and the judge said he wasn't going to allow the school to be closed. Students were there and the school was staying open. So I believe the judge in this particular instance is mindful of your concerns and that those concerns are protected. That the state will not be asked to pay funds to a school that is closed or closing. I believe that the question before the appeals court to a layman such as myself looks pretty cut and dried. I've reviewed the briefs that have been submitted. There's one more rebuttal that's going in and then the appeals court is open to rule. I think if we wait for that to happen, the financial condition of the school will be greatly improved or the school will be closed without losing the state money, without closing a school on kids and allowing us to be accountable to your dashboard and come back to you with either a closure and a surrender of a charter or a different dashboard for you to look at and for us to work out. That's what I'm asking for. I believe it is well served with either choice that you have before us of putting us on a consent agreement or tabling this item for about 4 months. But that's your choice and where your comfort level lies. I appreciated Mr. Mason's comments as to why we're here and what you need to consider. And I agree, it's up to you to consider that. It's not my vote, it's yours.
President Lee, yeah, looking at the receivers report, it doesn't have page numbers, but it's the 5th or 6th page. The receiver did a financial forecast for June through this fiscal year. Because I don't have any forecasts from you or anything, but this would show, if you shows a net loss of roughly $780,000. Take the bond and interest payments out of that, and depreciation, which is a non-cash issue.
Thank you.
You're still losing about $45,000, and that includes over $375,000 of ESSER money that won't be here forever. So if you adjust that into the future, you're losing upwards of $420,000 without those things, given the current state. And that is still a steep hill to climb.
Madam President, Mr. Swanson. First, my accountant would hit me on the side of the head and say, remember, those are unaudited statements.
For sure. I have nothing else to look at.
Second, no, I agree. Second, I would state again from my accountant that the receiver is not releasing all of the transactions to us to verify or to make comment about. They are reporting to the court on a regular basis. We differ as to some facts. Third, I can tell you we are working with the school, making the payroll, seeing the funds come in. We have a positive cash flow, and the school will have money in excess at the end of the fiscal year.
Madam President, help me understand the impact to the school between tabling this for 4 months and acquiring the consent agreement now. Help me understand what's the nature of your request?
Madam President, Mr. Mason. There is certainly, I believe I would be remiss if I didn't sit down with the board of directors of the school and explain to them that a consent agreement is a level of risk to the school. The preference that I would have with the tabled motion is that I come back to you and that I'm able to work with your staff to present whatever those numbers are as to whether or not I can stand before you and make a case not to require per your rules. And the rules are new to me, the consent agreement's new to me. These are things that were just presented to you today to discuss. So I certainly haven't done the most robust analysis of those. But my gut reaction is that my preference of the tabling is to allow me then to more directly address the need for a consent agreement with changed numbers. Those numbers don't come in quite as good as I like them to be. I'll be here and say the consent agreement is the appropriate guarantor for you for actions appropriate. And I'd be comfortable with that at that time. That's why I asked you did not ask you to deny this item, but rather to put it for reconsideration at a later date.
And is that you anticipate then a ruling from the Court of Appeals in 4 months?
I think any attorney would be happy to tell you that you never anticipate a ruling in any given amount of time from any court. The legislature sure having a lot of fun with that, with the superintendent's situation right now and school funding. Court rulings are not a promise. However, generally speaking, we were given to believe that most Court of Appeal actions, once adopted by the court, are resolved within 9 to 12 months. We have run a better than 6-month time period at this point in time. That's all I can tell you.
So you're saying that you had the appeal, the hearing 6 months ago?
No, the acceptance by the court of the action. I don't remember the exact date, but it's been about that far. They were first approached in June.
So there's no promise then that we're going to have resolution 4 months from now either. You could be back here asking us to table this again until we finally get a ruling, correct? Or not?
I could be here before you in 4 months, and depending on your calendar, saying that hadn't taken place and that I probably don't have a good reason to ask you not to have us enter into the consent agreement.
Yeah.
Could we perhaps ask Andrew to just talk about the academic performance of the school?
The academic.
Yeah.
I don't think Andrea would talk about the academic performance of the school, but we can. I don't speak for Andrea, but I feel like I'm accurate.
I don't think you want me to talk.
Yeah.
Sorry, can we have somebody from staff?
Maybe I do.
Yes,
Maybe
I would
I don't
say. So, yes, and maybe, yeah,
I can go through it for you really quickly. So as we do with all of our executive summaries for the board, we put together a charter holder profile. And you can see that in the appendices, and it starts on page 9 on the executive summary. You scroll down to page 10, you will see letter grades for the schools in FY18 and FY19. So Prescott Valley, which serves grades 6 through 8, were Ds in FY18 and FY19, with no letter grades since then. And then for Prescott Valley, which serves grades 9 through 12, they were Bs. And then you see their proficiency scores down below. We also then provide for this most recent year, the minimally proficient, partially proficient, and because of the small number of students tested, those have been redacted.
Canyon View is the high school. But just the high school's name is Canyon View.
Oh, I'm sorry, right.
Madam President, Mr. Swanson, the school has been operating as a B school with the difficulty that the students that we take in the middle school come from other sources, as is shown well in the grades. And they have had higher grades at the middle school level in the past. It's been an A school. But we're taking in students that are operating at a D level and turning them into B students as we take them through high school, turning it into a B school as we take them into the high school measures and graduate them. And that is where a great deal of our focus has been, is in the remediation of those 6th and 7th graders that come to us from elsewhere. But those are the grades that are before you.
just to speak on that a little bit, because I guess I'm just concerned, because typically when I look at the data, I always, I look at the easy merit scores at both schools, they decline significantly from FY18 to FY19. So kind of pre-COVID, right? Because definitely post-COVID, we see that. And then when I look at your FAE, so I like to then go to FAE and say, okay, what does the FAE tell us? How are you doing with these students over a long period of time? And I'm really concerned because for your math students, so the 1-year FAE is like a 31 proficiency rate and then drops to a 17% when they've been with you for 3 years. Science goes from 31 to 29, which with your small school size is probably statistically the same, right? And then ELA, you have a bit of an increase. You go from 40 to 34, dropping to 34 and then go to 45. So I guess I'm just concerned that it appears that as students are staying with you, they're, at least with this measure, what I can look in front of me, they're not making the gains that you claim at the very least in math and science. And that's really concerning with declining AZ merit scores pre-COVID, decline in FAE. I mean, and then potentially issues with finances, which says then how do you get the resources that you need, hiring more paraprofessionals, you know, all the different things, whatever the resources are that you would allocate. I'm really concerned about this school. And I guess I'm really concerned even more so because typically when we go the consent agreement route, they are charter holders who come before us with a very specific plan. They tell us all the things that they've done prior to the meeting and then all the things that they plan to continue doing for the future. I have a really hard time with this. I have a really hard time where the academics are not where they need to be according to this data. The finances, according to what I have in front of me, do not seem accurate. And then is it my understanding too, that there's also an operational consent agreement as well?
There has been for,
That's currently
I
inactive?
don't know.
It's currently active, sorry.
That is correct.
Okay.
This charter is under a consent agreement
Wait
for
a
operation.
second.
I guess I just have a really hard time I mean, I just want charters to be really clear that they don't just come up here and get a consent agreement, right? Like we don't like, and there can be closure, and I have a hard time this being the case that gets a consent agreement. If I'm just to be perfectly honest, this is really hard for me to say that this would even be allowable to be a consent agreement.
Madam President, your experience and background in the disaggregation of the data is excellent, and I understand the concerns that you have. I believe that the ESSER funding has made a significant opportunity for us with respect to the funds and the focus on the students and their achievement. And that is where we are working to recover this community from the impacts. We are working at it. I'm pleased with our performance in the operational regard and how that dashboard has improved greatly. And I recognize that we are under that consent agreement.
Well, I'm gonna take them to the restroom because Allison's in there. Thank you. Or if you wanna,
Okay,
technical, I apologize.
that's okay.
What's your plan? That's really tough then, right? So then it brings us full circle back to financials, because if the reliance is kind of on ESSER, that's gone, you know, that's phasing out from what I believe is gonna happen. And so then what do you do?
ESSER 3 funds are just in the process of being expended. The mandate on the expenditure was for tried and true programs that have data backing up what they've done. Their implementation is in progress at the school, and will continue. It's not the expenditure and purchase of a program is not something that you're looking at a 10-year plan type of deal on. You're looking at implementing and getting started and using it in those immediate years.
But then there's an ongoing, I mean, there's always like, it's a subscription, even if you buy a 6-year plan, in 6 years, you have to afford to renew it, right?
There are funds that are budgeted and allocated for that.
That you didn't have prior, but that you will have after ESSER's done?
Yes.
Do you want to clarify that maybe? I guess I'm just
Well,
confused how you didn't have them pre-ESSER. You will have them during ESSER.
Well,
but
I
you will
would
continue
say
them on
that one of the specific areas that allows for that is by supporting those small classes, the offsite classes that give their revenue to the school for support. There is a source of funds there.
As the micro schools increase. that
Yes.
you're funding. Okay, so you're counting on that. Okay. Are there any other questions, board members?
What do you know about President, what do you know about the academic performance of the micro school? And are you engaged in that?
I am engaged in that. I'm quite frankly expecting it to outpace us to start with its initial input. So it is a school that was in place prior to contracting with us for that situation. Looking at their data, I think it's more than a presumption on my part, but the rubber meets the road with the state testing.
clarifying questions too. For the board staff, if we look at revoking, would it close both schools?
President Lee and Superintendent Hoffman, yes, if you do revoke a charter, that includes both schools.
And then I also wanted to point out for the members too, that nearly 19% of the high school population is special education. Just wanted to point that out for the board. And I'll just comment in general that from year to year to year over, on our dashboards, whether it's academics, operational, or financial, I mean, there's so many issues. Sometimes some of the metrics get better from year to year to year, but there's just a lot of different areas that have been not meeting the expectations of boards, of the metrics set by board policy. No matter which area you're looking at, we're seeing a lot of issues year to year to year. Sometimes, like again, sometimes they get better. Being in a consent agreement, I know operationally some things have gotten better, but that's really concerning to me to see, especially since we're focused here today on the financial framework, which is really, like Mr. Mason was saying, months and months of work in putting together this financial framework to adequately and effectively tease apart which charter schools are facing significant financial issues. So to me, that raises a lot of alarms to see so many different areas that are falling below what has been set by board expectation and policy.
Yeah, I presently, I'm, not really confident in where we're headed here. I can't control the legal process. I can't control what the trustee or the school or the receiver or the bondholders will do, quite frankly. And I think we have a duty to our kids to make sure that we are giving them an option and not having something happen to them that is out of their control and could adversely impact them. So I think in that, there's a process around this as well, but I think I would move to revoke. I make a motion.
Yeah.
I move to issue a notice of intent to revoke the charter contract of Parkview School, Inc. for failure to meet the financial performance expectations set forth in the board's financial performance framework in violation of its charter and state law. Parkview School, Inc. is given notice that it must comply with the requirements set forth in administrative rule regarding notice to the schools, staff, parents, and guardians of the notice of the intent to revoke and with required submissions to the board.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Aaron, with the roll call, please.
Vice President Close.
Aye.
Superintendent Hoffman.
I like to comment that, anytime we're in this position of closing schools, it just gives me a really heavy heart. But we're looking at the data in front of us, and like I said, there's across many areas of concern, which ultimately trickles down to our students and the families. So I just want to say it's with a heavy heart that I vote aye.
Dr. Crockett. Mr. Mason.
I'd like to comment, in reviewing the measures, you see that that we're failing on 5 of the 6 of them. And that over the past 3 years, 2019 to 2021, there's been failure in the measures every year in multiple categories. I'd further add that we the very reason for why these measures were implemented was to try to catch schools before they do leave students out without an option. And I think that that's what's happening here. For that reason, I support and move to approve the motion.
Ms. Rice,
Aye.
Mr. Swanson,
I'd like to comment. You know, and we spent a lot of time on this, and Mr. Pike, I appreciate all of your efforts with the school. We need to consistently expect more from our charters and not less. And we need to keep pushing for excellent charters to be the basis of what we're doing here. And these are businesses, they're hard to run, and we also need to protect the state and the kids. So I vote aye.
President Lee,
Aye.
motion passes unanimously.
We are going to be going back now to agenda item D. So welcome back. Superintendent's report, go for it.
Thank you, President Lee, Vice President Close, and board members. First, it is good to be back, and I would also like to take a moment to acknowledge respectfully that the geographical landscape of Maricopa County sits on the ancestral homeland of those indigenous nations that have inhabited this land for centuries, including the Pima, Lehigh, and Ojibwe. And first I'll say I was so grateful to be able to spend time healing and connecting with my newborn daughter, Clara, who is turning 3 months this week. And I want to say thank you to everyone who reached out with their well wishes and congratulations. Having spent that time on maternity leave, it truly underscored for me the importance of having the availability of maternity leave, and I'm even more committed to that now for other state employees, especially our teacher workforce. I think it's past time that all of our mothers and fathers, particularly those in the education field, also have access to paid maternity and paternity leave. Last week, I gave my annual State of Education address, which focused on the issue that is most impacting our district public schools right now, which is the aggregate expenditure limit. And while our public charter schools are not required, they would not be impacted by this directly to return 16% of the budget to comply with the limit, our charter schools would be impacted by cuts to our neighboring district schools. And so it's critical that our lawmakers address this issue and let our district's public schools get back to the critical business of educating students. And you can read my entire State of Education on the department's website, azed.gov. One exciting announcement from our Student Advisory Council. On March 10th, from 5 to 6 p.m., the department's Student Advisory Council will host their first student summit that is focusing on student mental health, technology, and cultural awareness. This summit has been completely organized by the students and for students. However, all are welcome to attend to learn more about what our students want out of public education. And this will all occur virtually. And so if you would like to register for the summit, and again, this is for anyone to attend and listen in, please email communications@azed.gov. A few other upcoming opportunities from the department in addition to the student summit. A couple other ones, we have the Arizona Educator Job Fair is coming up on Saturday, February 26th. LEAs are encouraged to register for a booth to seek new employees for their community. And if you're interested in seeking a job at one of our attending schools, that any people should also register on our website. And then registration is also open for ADE's Principals Academy for the April 2022 cohort. This free professional learning opportunity provides tools, strategies, and resources to assist principals in the observation and evaluation process. You can apply on our website for that as well. And last, our Office of Indian Education will have their monthly policy and program update meeting on February 28th. And there's more information on that on the website for the Office of Indian Education section.
Great, thank you so much. Board members, any questions for the superintendent? right.
I saw her speeches.
All right, up next, executive director's report, Ashley.
Presently, Superintendent Hoffman and board members, as an update for legal matters, Accelerated Elementary and Secondary Schools has been informed or has informed the board that it will be surrendering its charter contract after the board issued a notice of intent to revoke in December of 2021. Therefore, that matter will not be going to the Office of Administrative Hearings. With regard to the appeal by Arizona Education Solutions for the board having only partially approved its enrollment cap increase, the board will be providing a written status update to the Office of Administrative Hearings by March 1st of 2022. And board staff plans to bring to the board in March quite a few operational consent agreements as we are finalizing those right now. And that is my update for legal matters.
Okay, thank you. Board members, any questions for Ashley? Okay.
As promised, I am providing you an update on the Arizona Online Instruction Amendment requests that have been approved by me, and then also the surrender agreements that have been approved by President Lee. At this time, President Lee, since our last board meeting, has signed off on Self-Development Eastmark, Self-Development Scottsdale, and Integrity Education Incorporated surrender agreements. Those were the 3 charters that were also under probationary risk level 1, and all 3 of them individually decided to surrender as opposed to coming from the board. I have not signed or approved any Arizona online instruction amendment requests at this time, and that's because there are no amendment requests that have come through. Additionally, I have approved 52 other amendment requests between January 7th and February 11th. And staff has been very busy doing site visits. Now, we have 2 separate processes for site visits. We have our typical site visits through our interval review and targeting, but also we have pop-ins. And so remember, those pop-ins are hopefully going to happen for every school each year. And they are supposed to be very quick, in and out within a couple of hours, and no disruption to the school. We want to be as quick as we can through that process. And we've done 10 pop-ins since January. We've done 9 5- and 10-year interval reviews, 10 renewal interval reviews. And then we've done roughly 5 targeted visits as well since that last meeting. So we've been pretty busy with visits. And do want to thank the charter schools for working with staff on those. It's been a great process so far. We have completed training since the January board meeting, and we did the charter rep boot camp. And so that is a training that we do twice a year for new charter representatives, and then representatives as well that would like to get just additional information from board staff. And that includes contract requirements, operational compliance, and other things. And then I'm going to hand it over to Serena to do a legislative update for all of you.
So good morning, board members. So I'll be keeping this update brief as we're going to be discussing some legislative matters later on the agenda as well. So our bill 2177 has passed the House 59-0. It's waiting to be heard in the Senate, and they'll begin hearing House bills the week of February 28th. So we're just kind of holding steady on that. This session, the final introduction date for House bills was January 31st. Senate was that Monday. And so over 1,600 bills have been filed this session. So there's been a lot for us to review, a lot for us to keep our eye on, including one bill that was introduced a little bit late, just to flag for you all. By the way, we keep eyes on any bills that may be impacting our charters and our agency, 2 separate kind of buckets. And whatever is impacting the charters will be updated in our compliance statement of assurance at the end of session so that charters get that information right away. So one of the bills, 2808, was introduced on last Monday, which makes some changes, some pretty hefty changes to expansion of charter schools and some other failing school situations. So while the board has historically supported expansion of quality charters, we are working with and in discussion with the bill sponsor and stakeholders to work through the different provisions of the bill and make sure that it works with our current processes as well. So if you all have any questions, I can answer them, and if not, I'll be back in front of you in a little bit.
How can we get a better briefing on 2808 and what it does?
President Lee and Member Swanson, we are in initial discussions right now with the bill sponsor and the governor's office on that bill. And I know that there's going to be additional stakeholder meetings, I believe, this week. We will provide updates to the board as we continue that work. But as of right now, I think it's we're too much in the infancy stage to really go through the details of the bill. But we will make sure to update you in more detail going forward.
Any other questions for Serena? Fantastic. Thank you, Serena.
Moving on to board member update for all of you. As you can tell, we've had quite a bit of change to our board members. Ms. Wood has resigned. She is now running for the state legislature. In addition to that, we are looking to possibly have 4, maybe 5 new appointments coming either later this week or early next week. That timeline keeps on shifting quite a bit, but our hope is that we will get new board member announcements either later this week or early next week. I'll make sure to keep all of you updated on that. And once we get that board and commission announcement.
All right. Any questions for Ashley? Okay. Then we are going to go on to agenda item G. And that is the implementation of NAEA exemplary practice presentation. And it looks like the ombudsman, I always get that word wrong, Educational Services, Wayne Tucker, Michael Gotu, and Pinky Jones. State your name for the record. Will we be able to view their presentation?
Unfortunately, you won't be able to view the presentation. It is included in the board materials, and everyone that is online and through the recording will be able to see the presentation as well.
So everybody has a printed.
Yes, and this is,
Okay.
will be viewable on the recording.
Okay, good.
And actually, the board members do not have it printed, but they have it on their board materials.
Yeah,
Oh, you
and it's
do.
a-
Okay.
Yeah, we're pulling it up.
Yep.
All right, you can go for it. State your name for the record and then.
Yes, Rochelle Morris. Good evening, President Lee and board members and Superintendent Hoffman. It's my pleasure to be here today as the president-elect for the Arizona Alternative Education Consortium. Our mission with the consortium is to advocate, educate, and collaborate. And one of our missions also is to showcase the best practices occurring among our member schools. And one of those schools today that will be our showcase school is Ombudsman. But prior to that, preluding, we have a little bit of data that we wanted to share about alternative education. Alternative education is a designation made by the Department of Education. Currently, we have about over 150 schools that have been identified as alternative education. That is a designation that has to be renewed annually, and it does require that the school serves at least 70% of their population or more as being identified as at risk. And those at risk criteria is very specific. It includes students who are wards of the state, students who are primary home or caregivers, also includes dropouts, students with behavioral backgrounds. So really, it's our most at-risk students across the state. So today we'll be taking a look at Ombudsman and showcasing program they have there that ties into the National Alternative Education's exemplary practices, specifically exemplary practice 7, transition planning and support, and exemplary practice 9, collaboration. I'm clicking, thinking it's, I'm magic over here. I'm doing this.
Yeah. You just point a finger in the air.
But we did want to highlight before we go into the excellent work that Ombudsman is doing is some data that has been put together by the Arizona Charter Schools Association. And in this particular slide, you're looking at data that, without my glasses, looks like it's coming from 2011, 2016, and it's statewide enrollment for those school years. And looking at that graph, you'll see that in 11th grade, enrollment across the state significantly drops. If you'll go on to the next slide. This is data that has been compiled for 2020, 2021, so pandemic years. You'll see that again, in 11th grade, enrollment across the state in all schools significantly drops. And in the next slide, this is where we disaggregate that data between alternative education enrollment and non-alternative education. And you can see in 12th grade, alternative education enrollment significantly increases. And so we know from this data that as enrollment drops in 11th grade, it is our alternative education schools that are re-engaging disenfranchised students. So we wanted to showcase that because this is significant credibility towards the work that alternative education is doing for most at-risk students. And it's not just pandemic related. This has been happening for a decade at least before that. We also wanted to highlight that in addition to the exemplary practices, there has been a meta-analysis done that indicates there are specific strategies that have a high effect on reducing the dropout rate. And you'll see from that bar graph that the one with the highest effect size is career development and job training. And that is specifically what Ombudsman will be presenting today, is their showcase of a program that aligns to that, as well as mentoring and family engagement. You'll see that those have the highest rate of keeping those students engaged until reaching diploma, more so than what you'll see at the bottom, which is academic support. Those students don't return to school for the academic support. They return to school for the mentoring and the post-high school pathways that we provide as alternative educators. This slide here demonstrates in more detail what bullet points involve those exemplary practices 7 and 9. And now on to the good stuff, and that is the opportunity for Ombudsman to showcase their exemplary practices. And so I'll introduce Ms. Binky.
All right. Thank you. Binky Michelle Jones. I am Senior Vice President for Ombudsman Educational Services, also board member of the Arizona Alternative Education Consortium. And I want to thank Rochelle. She was here as President-elect. Wayne Tucker was not able to make it, our president. So really thankful for the opportunity. And one of the things I want to reiterate too is the Arizona Alternative Education Consortium, you know, a group of practitioners really in alternative education. And we talk about these NAE exemplary practices on a regular basis in our consortium meetings. And, you know, this is an exciting opportunity for us to tell you great things that are happening out there. And we are just one of many schools that are doing a lot of really neat things. So I want to introduce to you our Regional Vice President, Michael Godo. He is a National Board Certified Teacher. He is also a Microsoft Innovative Educator, one of only 30 in the state. And he has just been a real innovator in our district. And he continues to excel and just really provide a lot of wonderful expertise in this. So I'm going to let him take over the presentation and tell you what we do.
Okay. Thank you. Good morning, everybody. So my name is Michael Godo, and again, thank you very much for the introduction and the chance to brag about what we're doing at Ombudsman and across all alternative schools in Arizona. So if we actually jump to the next slide, please. Oh, there we go. All right. So we know definitely when COVID took place that we had to be innovative and do some flexible things, but at the heart of what we're doing, we really wanted to, just as Rochelle said, there were three words that stood out with the charter board. We chose 3 words: connect, collaborate, and graduate. That's really been our focus and our rally cry for the last 3 years. Because when we talk about transition programs and reaching out to kids, we can't do anything unless, number one, we connect with them. We make that first connection, build the relationship. And that's something that alternative schools, just as any school, you got to build the relationship and really get down to what the kid needs. Once we find out what they need, it really brings us into the collaboration and graduate part. Oh, sorry, go back. No, sorry. So the collaboration was really important to us because just as you know, when you talk about instructional best practices, it's not about getting a kid to sit in a chair and just listen to the teacher. No, we got to have conversations. We got to figure out what's your career path? What are you interested in? What's going to be a next step? so that we can get kids to the graduation. And that's what's really important. When you go back to that graph that we saw a little while ago about 11th and 12th graders being a big bulk of the enrollments, those are career students. Those are kids who are young adults looking at what are my next steps? What's my job going to be? And yeah, we can get them just to graduation, but we have to get them ready for a next step beyond that. Yeah, they've got the full-time job at Burger King, which is fine, but we want them to be able to apply for a manager. We want them to be able to move somewhere else. We want them to move into another industry or another job so they can keep growing. So what we've done, can you go next slide, please. We have a couple different programs at Ombudsman that we focused on really with post-secondary efforts and making sure that our students are getting ready for the next level. And the one that we're here to highlight today is actually our partnership with Microsoft Education and putting our kids on what we call a Microsoft Showcase path. We're very fortunate to have some partnerships with specifically Microsoft Education, as well as most businesses. You know, a lot of people mention Google or other things. When it comes down to it, Microsoft is still the industry standard. It's what kids are using. If the kid can master Excel, they can do things that most of us in the room are still trying to figure out. So it's really exciting to put kids on this path. And if you take a look at this slide here, it's really broken down in 4 different areas, because when you look at the exemplary practices, it's not just about having a program and throwing it out there. It's about professional development. It's about making a transition plan for the students. And it all starts, #1, with employee training. So we are very proud in our district to celebrate that 100% of our teachers are Microsoft Innovative Educators. We require every single employee, whether they're a graduate intern, whether they're an admin assistant at a front desk, whether they're at the district office helping with records, every single employee has to go through this training. We require it, and it's part of our new employee onboarding. Why? Because we know every student's going to get a Microsoft-rich experience, and it has to start with the staff. So it also comes to community collaboration. Like we mentioned, we've been very fortunate to have a strong relationship with Microsoft, especially, you know, they had 2 stores. They got 1 store over in Chandler, and they have educational reps who are in and out of our buildings when they allow them to travel right now. So they're with our kids. And one of the greatest conversations that happened with that is we actually had a member from Microsoft come into our Charter East building. And, you know, he's a very relaxed guy in his flip-flops, sport shorts, full-time Microsoft employee. And he told the kids, look, I don't have a bachelor's degree. I don't have a master's. I went out and I tinkered. I figured it out. I found free certifications. I found a way to keep learning, which again, didn't have to be the college route. I found ways to keep learning through trainings. And Microsoft found me. They contacted me on LinkedIn and said, hey, we will pay for you to move. We will pay for you to do X, Y, Z, because you've got these trainings that other people don't have. So that really stood out to our kids that, hey, you can make yourself marketable, and there's so many other options out there. So we do continue that with staff collaboration, staff recognitions and successes. If you saw us on our, on our phones over there, myself and Binky, yes, because our staff constantly post on a Microsoft team network, showcase our graduates, showcase kids who are moving within the Microsoft system, or within our other programs too. It's not just Microsoft. We also have medical and a certified technician program, which we'll talk about here in a second. So, we love to celebrate the fact that some of our kids just, I don't mean to, I was gonna say Burger King again, I shouldn't say I mentioned them once. We have one kid who just quit their job in the fast food industry because now they're going to move into a medical position at the front desk because they knew how to use Excel. They knew how to use Excel, so they just got a job at $19 an hour. So now they're setting themselves up for something new and something different. I don't know if I told you about that, Doctor. So it's new information always coming in, and we love to celebrate it. And that's what's so big about the staff collaboration and recognitions. Also with Microsoft, which is great, we also want to make sure that when we celebrate, we don't just celebrate internally. It's not just us ombudsmen celebrating what's going on. We want to make sure the Charter Association knows about it. You guys know about other people. We want to make sure the state knows about it. So it's really nice at the bottom of the slides, you can kind of see a progression of sustainability. I know it's really small, a progression of sustainability to make sure that our schools stay on the path to become Microsoft Showcase schools. So you can tell 4 years ago, we started with 1 Microsoft expert, which at that time was just me. There were 9 of us in the state, Microsoft Innovative Experts. It was just me and 13 other people that I kept trying to contact. It was difficult. Things are busy. And you can see a progression of growth. We then went to 5 experts and 1 showcase school, which is huge. That was really huge to know that of all the schools in the state of Arizona, 1 of them was a Microsoft Showcase school, and it was a small alternative school in the state of Arizona. So we were very happy to celebrate that. You can continue the progression. We jumped up to 14 experts. Now it's 27 experts this year, 27 of, I think, the 30 total experts in Arizona. So we've really tried to make sure that our staff are all over that Microsoft market, Microsoft education piece. And because really, when you talk about sustainability and going back to the exemplary practices of professional development, it can't be one person. If I'm the only expert in the district and I disappear, then everything we've done is gone. So now there's 26 other experts in our district that can continue the work, continue putting our kids on a showcase path so that they can do something beyond just getting their high school diploma. You can go to the next slide, please. So this is the really cool part. This is really bringing it home when you get to actually see the kids interacting. It's not just about Microsoft. When we talk about transition planning and moving kids to a next step and making sure they're not just getting a high school degree, you can see pictures of our medical students here that are taking some diagnostics with fellow volunteers or community members that are coming in. The middle, you can actually see, it's a little hard to see, but you see some kids tinkering with some cabling. We offer what's called CTech. It's a certified technician program. Kids can go through it, they learn cabling, and you can see the kid on the far right. I don't know if you can see it. There might be a Zoom logo. There's a Zoom logo in mine. You might be able to see it. That kid just graduated last year. Again, he was able to quit his job doing landscaping and still doing something outside, but doing something that was very, I don't want to say management level, but he moved up a step. Now he's going in and checking other people's work. Other people are in their hands working. He gets to go in and look at their work and say, you did that cabling wrong, let's redo it. That's what we want to put our kids in play for. And you can also see, some kids might not fit those molds. We'd love to say that our schools offer every single opportunity that's out there, but we don't. We can't have all programs, but we do invite all community members in. So you can see the second to last picture here, we actually have a member of the Phoenix fire department, came in and talked to the kids about jobs in fire, jobs in public service, and let them try on the equipment to see how easy it is to walk up and down steps with all the equipment on. So, it's been really exciting to see what our kids choose. We try to push them to make sure that at minimum, whether they are interested in a tech field or not, we want all our kids to get a rich Microsoft Showcase experience. And we do that. We do that to making sure our staff are trained and making sure that our kids, when they leave our schools, they know how to do some basic functions. Our kids are not going to be graduates who leave and you put them in front of a computer and they can't function. So you have to send them to do something else. We want them to stand out. We want them to be the ones who go to an interview and they stand out because they can say, yeah, I know how to do those basic functions. Because there are, there's a lot of adults that still function with or have trouble functioning with Excel or advanced features of Word. And we're trying to make sure our kids are the ones that are standing out. Even though they come from an alternative population, we want them to stand out, graduates that are producing in society and that we're definitely proud of. So with that, I think we just have one last question slide.
Well, you guys, thank you so much for being here today. I think, alternative schools are so important, and remember when I started out in alternative school, the recruitment that we would do was at the mall during the school day. And I don't know, that's what we did. All the teachers had to sign up, and that's where we got our students and let them know about what an alternative school is. And there's such a stigma, I think, in the community about what people think an alternative school is, and what it actually is amazing and is so necessary. And so I appreciate just everything that you guys are doing, providing opportunities that aren't just college. I wish all high schools everywhere, right? Not just in the alternative. I always joke, my brother didn't go to college and sold his first tech company for $250,000 at the age of 19. And, I have my master's degree and got a whopping $46,000 a year. So he won, but I just, while it's a great path, college, there's also so many great paths, and students just don't know them all because, parents don't know them all because it's hard to know them all. And so I just appreciate the work that you guys are doing and the technical work that you guys are doing. I think truly sets students up for success just for life, right? And so just appreciate you guys being here today. Thanks. Board members, any other questions or comments? Yeah, go for it.
Presently, ditto to everything that President Lee said, and thank you for the work you guys do. I do have a few questions about outcomes as it relates to this, sort of the online component in here. And when I see alternative schools come through here and we're doing things with them, it's the hardest decision-making I can make because I feel like I had the least amount of information because of, we don't really see how they're doing, or sometimes they say, well, the bar needs to be low because of X, Y, and Z, and I don't like that. So I'm just curious how you guys address that issue on outcomes and accountability. And sometimes I feel like, and I don't mean to be over the top here, but like there's a balance between the system serving our students and the system using our students. And I feel like there's some of that in there sometimes. So how do you police that and
Sure. Yeah, I can speak to that. Well, I think one of the opportunities is the fact that the Alternative Education Consortium is going to, want to come before you and provide these presentations so that you know there are exemplary practices happening. I do think it's important to remember that, as you saw in the chart and the graph, that a number of students and the majority of students that enter into alternative schools are doing it at the average age of 17. So they've had a long history of failure in a variety of systems. And the way that we actually measure success is important. And I know there are some accountability measures out there right now that we do use. And I think it is important to remember that those are effective, and they've been developed by practitioners over the course of the last 5 years minimum to really look at the things that we think we need to measure to make sure is successful for a student coming in at the average age of 17, behind in grade level, and then able to go beyond high school, earn the high school diploma, but go beyond into workforce. So hopefully that, does make sense. And I think the metrics that we do look at right now are appropriate for that. Okay.
Thank you. And then one
Thank you.
follow-up, President Lee. Are you guys tracking Representative Udall's Bill 2028?
Yes, we are.
And do you guys have a position on it?
Well, I think as others say, we have a lot of work to do to take a look at it. I would say that, but there's stuff in there that is concerning. And I think that we're just reading through it right now and making sure that we have, an opportunity to be part of those meetings for sure. Thank you.
It's an alternative accountability.
All right.
Okay.
Any other questions? Yes, go for it.
Oh, yes.
Say how excited I am to hear what you're doing with Excel. Because I know several people in the workforce right now who are totally without that skill and set. And so, and these children are going to really gain from that. Anytime you can do that in any of your schools.
Yes,
it's great.
Exactly. Thank you. We appreciate that. All right. Well, thank you again.
All right. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
All right. Up next, we tricked you guys. All right, charter amendments. We have a presentation by Shannon, and then we'll invite the charter holder up to present.
Good morning, Madam President and Vice President Close and Superintendent Hoffman. Legacy Traditional School Casa Grande has submitted an amendment request to increase its enrollment cap from 1440 to 2050 for fiscal year 2023. The increase is to accommodate increased enrollment demand at the school and anticipated population growth in Casa Grande. The charter holder does not meet the staff recommendation criteria because past enrollment trends do not indicate that the charter will exceed its enrollment cap within the next 3 years. And I'm available for any questions if you have them.
Any questions for Shannon? All right. If not, then if the charter holder will come up, state your name for the record, and any statement you'd like to make.
Good morning, members of the board. President Lee, nice to be with you this morning. I think it is still morning. So my name is Corey Kennedy. I serve as Chief of Staff for Vertex Education here representing Legacy Traditional Schools, and we really do appreciate the staff and the board's consideration of this enrollment cap increase request. By way of just a bit of background, Legacy Traditional Schools is an A-rated network, and the Casa Grande campus is the only A-rated school in the area within a 5-mile radius. Currently, the school's enrollment is at 1,318 students. The wait list stands at 169 students today. Re-enrollment took place recently for next year, and remarkably, 97% of those students re-enrolled for next year. The executive summary points out a number of items that reflect positively on this request and stand in support of it, but I do want to address a couple of items that may be helpful. First, as pointed out in the staff recommendation section of the executive summary, using past enrollment trends, Casa Grande's enrollment is not anticipated to exceed the current cap of 1,440 in the next 3 years. The enrollment has remained between 1,200 and 1,350 students over several years now. We did not have a lot of excess space to expand enrollment, which of course impacts that growth trajectory over the last 3 years. In addition, although we could have increased enrollment in some grades, we made a conscious decision to hold on expanding and opening additional classroom sections to avoid roll-up issues when those students move to higher grades, and also to preserve special areas on the campus that we believe are important, such as library, music rooms, and art rooms, instead of taking those up for additional classroom space. So with this proposed enrollment cap increase, we'll be able to enroll all of the students from the wait list, open additional classroom sections, and meet the really incredible population growth that's occurring in the Casa Grande area. And we're excited to be able to provide an A-rated education to more students in an area that desperately needs it. Second point from the executive summary is that like many, if not all schools, the Casa Grande campus experienced a decline in its proficiency results in ELA and math for 2021. Not surprisingly, this is directly related to the disruptions and challenges that all schools have faced related to COVID. We do anticipate that Casa Grande's academic results will continue to compare favorably to surrounding schools and to state averages when that comparison is possible. And we will continue to do everything possible to help students recover lost progress from this unprecedented season. Finally, we do also recognize the challenges of hiring additional teachers in this environment to meet this expected enrollment rise. But we do feel confident in being able to do so based on having an entire talent acquisition team dedicated to hiring teachers and staff, including one recruiter who is focused specifically on Casa Grande. And the recruitment process for teachers and the new sections has already started. One other positive factor I'll note is that the principal at this campus has been at that campus since 2017, first as an instructional coach and more recently as the principal. She has great relationships with them. Already 90% of her teaching staff have signed up to return for next year. Last point, as you're certainly well aware, the Casa Grande area is experiencing tremendous economic growth, fueled by large new employers like Lucid Motors, and that is attracting employees and families and students. And so we expect that growth to continue to accelerate. All signs are that the Casa Grande area is booming and will continue to boom, and the need for high quality educational programs is also booming. And so thank you again for your consideration. I am available for any questions that you may have.
Great. Board members, are there any questions?
Two quick ones. Well, you answered one. I was going to ask about explaining the drop in ELA and math. So that was, you're saying that's COVID related.
For sure.
The second one is just, you mentioned, it's nothing major, but maybe, you mentioned your physical plan. So with an enrollment cap increase, you'll be able to accommodate everyone? Is that, will you be able to do that? I guess is my question.
Yes, we believe so. The plan is such that with all the factors that I described and the physical capacity of the expanded campus, we will be able to serve those students in the area.
All right, those are my questions.
You answered mine, which is rare. So, so I don't have any board members. Are there any other questions or comments? Okay, with that, is there a motion?
I'll make a motion. I move based on the information contained in the board materials and presented today to approve the request to increase the enrollment cap from 1,440 to 2,050 in FY 2023 for the contract of Legacy Traditional School Casa Grande.
Thank you. Aaron, roll call.
Vice President Close.
Aye.
Superintendent Hoffman.
Aye.
Dr. Crockett.
Aye.
Mr. Mason.
Aye.
Ms. Rice.
Aye.
Mr. Stratton.
Aye.
Mr. Swanson.
Aye.
President Lee.
Just a quick comment. I'm really excited about the Casa Grande expansion. I think that you hit the nail on the head when you said that you're the only A-rated school within a 5-mile radius. I think the community desperately needs expansion of good schools down there. They don't get much love in the charter world, I feel like. So I have a home there, and it's and there's a need in the community. So I'm excited about this. So with that, aye.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. Okay. Up next, we are on agenda item L2. Andrea?
President Lee, Superintendent Hoffman, members of the board. At its April 2021 meeting, the board voted to enter into a consent agreement with City Center for Collaborative Learning due to the fiscal years 2017, 2019, and 2020 audits finding that the charter holder had failed to comply with statutory fingerprint requirements. The consent agreement, which took effect on June 4th, 2021, specifies several terms and conditions used to monitor the charter holder's adherence to the statutory fingerprinting requirements, including no fingerprinting noncompliance identified in the charter holder's audits. The charter holder's fiscal year 2021 audit, which is covered by the agreement, indicated 2 nurses that had been employed by the charter holder did not have valid fingerprint clearance cards. Staff requested and received documentation regarding the 2 nurses from both the audit firm and the charter holder. Board staff review of this documentation revealed that the first nurse's last day of employment was November 6th of 2020, and the second nurse's last day of employment was April 28th, 2021, both prior to the effective date of the consent agreement, which again was June 4th, 2021. However, due to the time period covered or included in the fiscal year 2021 audit, the absence of valid fingerprint clearance cards for the 2 nurses was included as a finding. Today, the board must determine whether the fingerprinting information disclosed in the fiscal year 21 audit would be considered a material failure by the charter holder to comply with the consent agreement's terms and conditions. While the absence of fingerprint clearance cards occurred during the audit time period, the nurses were not employed by the charter holder on the effective date of the consent agreement. Therefore, the board may determine the finding is de minimis and not material to the terms and provisions of the consent agreement, and conclude that the fingerprinting information disclosed in the 21 audit does not constitute a material failure by the charter to comply with the consent agreement. Since it took effect, the charter holder has complied with all other provisions of the consent agreement. I am available for questions, and it is my understanding that the charter is available, or the charter representative is available virtually.
Board members, if there's questions for Andrea, I have a quick one just before we invite the charter holder up. Is it accurate to state that both issues, the one in November and April, happened prior to, I know that it was prior to the effective date of the consent agreement, but was it prior to them coming before the board? That got them the consent agreement? Sorry, does that question make sense?
Yes, I think it does. If this doesn't
Okay.
answer it, let me know. The one nurse had started and left prior to the April board meeting. The second nurse, her last day was probably about 2 weeks after the board meeting.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, is there, oh, sorry, oh, go for it. Yeah.
My reading of the documents looked like the auditor did a sample and they reviewed 4 payrolls and found 2 people out of compliance, right?
They reviewed staff over multiple pay periods. So they, I believe they reviewed all the staff, but they looked at different payroll periods. So
Okay.
everybody
I was
on like the
wondering if there could have been
September
somebody who
payroll
missed.
would have been looked at, and then everybody on the November payroll would have been looked at, whatever the periods were.
Is it a fair characterization of saying the consent agreement was put in place because they weren't following the rules that were already in place, right? And the consent agreement says, you really have to follow this rule or you'll be in trouble.
Yeah, I think that is probably a way.
We didn't add any new rules.
Yeah, we did not add any new
No-
rules. They were
no-
having trouble complying with the fingerprinting requirements that were in place before. Same fingerprinting requirements were in place for the audit school year as were in place when you guys entered into the tentative agreement.
And this is becoming my least favorite subject at these meetings, is fingerprints. Because it's, as we all know, it's super important, but I'm not gonna lecture you.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you, Andrea. All right, then if the charter representative is here virtually, if you can unmute yourself at this time. I apologize, the board as a whole cannot see you, so, but we can hear you. So if you state your name for the record and any statement you'd like to make.
Good morning, Chad Blair, Executive Director and Charter Representative for City Center for Collaborative Learning. Good morning, everybody, and happy Valentine's Day. Thank you all for your good work on behalf of all charter schools and charter school students. Superintendent Hoffman, thank you for continuing to advocate for teachers, students, and schools throughout our state. And congratulations to you on the birth of your child this past year. I have been the ED of City Center for Collaborative Learning for 2 years. City Center operates 3 small public charter schools dedicated to implementing innovative best academic practices, including project-based learning, universal design for learning, full inclusion, competency-based learning, and literacy integration. A primary focus of my leadership since taking over as ED of this organization has been the integration of organizational processes, systems, and procedures for our organization as we transition from being founder-led schools to an efficient, equitable, and sustainable organization. I am proud of the success our schools are having in their support of all students, especially those who are most vulnerable. I am also proud of our organization's immense operational improvements, especially during a pandemic when the challenges of operating schools and serving the unique needs of our students, families, and staff have been immense, let alone the additional layers of implementing necessary and urgent operational changes. Since I presented to the ASBCS board regarding the fingerprint clearance card consent agreement in April of 2021, City Center for Collaborative Learning has continuously and effectively implemented wide-ranging structural changes to ensure full compliance with the consent agreement and ultimately the safety of our students. As you heard, Ms. Leader, Assistant Director of Audit and Financial Accountability, has commented multiple times about how City Center has been fully responsive, transparent, and proactive in our compliance with the consent agreement. In compliance with the fingerprint consent agreement, we sent a list by September 1st, 2021, identifying all school personnel for the year and documentation attesting all school personnel fingerprint clearance cards are valid and verified. Within 5 business days of any change to our school personnel, we have provided ASBCS with an updated list that reflects individuals added or removed. This list includes confirmation attesting City Center has verified fingerprint clearance cards are up to date and valid. City Center conducts weekly internal audits to ensure all school personnel fingerprint clearance cards are valid and up to date. City Center conducts monthly internal audits of all processes, and all of these processes have been effective in meeting and at times exceeding all of the compliance expectations of our consent agreement. A reorganized central office has taken over all hiring and onboarding of new employees, contractors, substitute teachers, and guest presenters. This is a significant change from the decentralized, school-driven approach used by the organization's previous leadership. The centralization of all hiring and onboarding has ensured that no new hires are made without a valid and up-to-date IVP fingerprint clearance card on file. This has been a cultural shift for our organization, as under previous leadership, our 3 school leaders were responsible for the hiring and onboarding of new staff, elective teachers, substitute teachers, and guest presenters. Schools also used to maintain fingerprint clearance cards on site. All of these processes are now completed by the central office in order to ensure compliance with the consent agreement. In order to thoroughly and successfully centralize all hiring and onboarding and to continuously self-audit our processes, City Center hired an additional full-time person in our central office. This increased our central office personnel from 2 to 3 people, thereby increasing our capacity to ensure our new hiring protocols are being followed, that all required documentation is maintained, all IVP fingerprint cards are regularly checked for validity, and all staff are informed when their fingerprint cards are going to expire in the next 4 months. The central office now completes a weekly internal audit to check that all school personnel have a valid and up-to-date fingerprint clearance card, that our staff list is up to date and accurate, and all reporting to ASBCS has been completed for the week. This is all in accordance with the ASBCS consent agreement. These lists are now double-checked against our payroll records, accounts payable activity, and school communications. All documentation is now housed in the central office and checked weekly. Our 2021 official external audit reported no findings. In February of 2021, City Center compiled a list of all school personnel in accordance with the ASBCS Corrective Action Plan. We provided all the valid IVP fingerprint card information. Nurse 2 in this case was not added to this list. This oversight was the last vestige of our now fully reformed HR approach. As previously mentioned, school leaders used to control the hiring and onboarding processes. Nurse 2 was hired and onboarded by our facilities department to work on pandemic-related health protocols without any unsupervised contact with students. When we compiled our initial list for ASBCS, we double-checked it with all of our school leaders. However, we did not double-check the list with the facilities department. This remaining vestige of our old siloed way of handling HR has been overhauled. With our now centralized process, we're able to fully track and account for all staff across the entire organization from our central office. This occurred before we had agreed to the fingerprint consent agreement. The consent agreement is doing its job. City Center has corrected all previous hiring issues and filled all HR gaps with appropriate structures, processes, and oversight. We've been consistent in our compliance with the consent agreement and fully transparent, cooperative, and communicative with ASBCS. No one is offered a school personnel work agreement without us having documentation of their valid and up-to-date fingerprint card on file. Fingerprint cards are checked weekly, and our staff know they have to renew their cards well in advance of their expiration date. We report any changes to our staff weekly to ASBCS. The transition to new leadership and the updating of internal processes and controls was especially challenging during the pandemic. Those processes are fully implemented, and our organization will continue to be in full compliance. Our processes have become integrated throughout the organization through additional trainings, documentation, standard operating procedures, and multiple levels of oversight. We appreciate the support of ASBCS and are proud of our work to be in full compliance. The systems and processes we have implemented will continue to ensure our organization is safe for all students and families, while also allowing us to continue the extraordinary pedagogical practices of our intentionally small schools, including project-based learning, mastery learning, expeditionary learning, universal design for learning, culturally responsive teaching, and literacy integration, which work together to create the transformational learning experiences for all of our students and lead to meaningful, authentic, joyful, and equitable outcomes for all. Thank you.
Thank you. Board members, are there any questions for the charter holder? I just have a question, and I think you answered this, but I just want to be clear. So when you came before us in April, at that time, did you tell us that the fingerprint clearance card issue had been completely rectified, but in actuality, there was a nurse that still didn't have the appropriate IVP card?
You know, I believed at that time that the system was in place and working correctly. The biggest change, has addressed that, one last final gap of our old system is the centralization of the hiring process and the onboarding system, which guarantees that no one is starting in our organization without a verified and documented IVP fingerprint card. Additionally, there is the additional level of oversight that we have added where we are weekly checking against all payroll and accounts payable procedures.
Ashley,
and so, it was sort of, all the gaps have been filled.
Thank you. Ashley, at the time, would board staff have checked that the fingerprint clearance cards were, so how do we miss the nurse, I guess, is what I'm trying to figure out.
Andrea can correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding of the situation that they were under a corrective action plan. We did request fingerprint clearance cards and verification of fingerprint clearance cards for all personnel at that time. It was our understanding that the documents that we had received were complete. However, it did not include the nurse on that list. So through our corrective action plan, we did not review the fingerprint clearance card for that remaining nurse.
And what led to the nurse no longer working as a, well, I mean, I guess generally speaking, I guess did you have to let her go because of the fingerprint? Can I ask that? Maybe I can't, I don't know. I guess you can tell me.
That is correct. I mean,
I don't want to answer that. Okay, I'm getting faces from lawyers, which happens often during these meetings. But, I don't know how to word this in a way that I think you can answer. So I guess I just want to ask the question.
When you know, when we discovered the gap with nurse 2, we did immediately begin to require the appropriate fingerprint IVP fingerprint clearance card process. That person who was working sporadically and also working at a hospital did not feel that she had the time to undertake that process. And yes, we did. That was the cause of the resignation.
When did you find out, like what date-ish did you find out that nurse 2 didn't have the valid fingerprint clearance card? Was that before or after the board meeting? If you recall.
I remember working on this, very seriously, throughout that time. I think that we discovered that gap after the presentation at the board meeting. Is my memory of that time.
Presently, that's our understanding as well.
Do we?
Presently,
Yeah.
just by the reading, of the consent agreement and the steps that are going on and the report by the charter holder, just looking at paragraph 4 on page 7 of the agreement terms and conditions, it says, for purposes of this consent agreement for the period of the consent agreement's effective date through FY26. So it says the consent agreement's effective date, which further reading, it sounds like the date you signed it last on June 4th. The charter holder agrees to ensure all this stuff happens. And so really all of this is outside of the consent agreement, from a purely technical perspective.
Yeah.
But yeah, this still remains my least favorite subject of charter schools.
I appreciate that. And right, like and I just want to say, like, this, when I immediately reported this to Ms. Leader, this information. This is not anything that we've been trying to hide. Since that consent agreement has been signed, it's an extensive agreement and requires a lot from our organization. The time and cost that it takes to complete all of those tasks, which are necessary and been helpful, and I believe strongly in all of them. But they've been considerable, and we have invested time and money and personnel to take this on. And since the signing of the consent agreement, have fulfilled every single aspect of the consent agreement. Which is a weekly communication with the ASBCS with full documentation. We verify all fingerprint cards every week. So since the signing of the consent agreement, we have been in full compliance. And so, this is, we have this consent agreement for 5 years, and there's, we are looking forward, and we are planning for, to continue this work, and we've budgeted for this work, and we have made completed the trainings, completed the culture shift. I can't tell you how many times I have had to personally talk to a school leader who says we are, it's during the pandemic, it's, we need subs, we need to get this person in the school, we're short-staffed. And I've had to say, I'm sorry, right? We have to do things differently now. We have to, ensure that everyone who enters our buildings has the proper IVP fingerprint card. And we've been very successful at that. So that the culture has changed, the systems have changed. It's implementing standard operating procedures are not my favorite thing. I am an educator, and I want to get straight to the vitally important work of teaching our kids. But I fully understand that this culture shift is necessary, not just for compliance, but for the safety of our students and families. And so it has become a top priority for me, and I am 100% confident in our systems.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I don't think they violated this consent agreement. I have two questions just for board staff. The first is it typical that a consent agreement goes into effect, like we don't sign it till, I guess it's only 2 months later? Is that what it was, is April to June?
So typically, once the board allows for the charter to enter into a consent agreement, board staff drafts up the consent agreement, especially for more operational issues, because it's tailored specifically to the charter. We try to get that out pretty quickly to the charter to review. We do allow time for their attorneys to review and then get back to us. And then ultimately, in this instance, we are able to have you sign it. But yeah, typically it does take a few months to get through a consent agreement.
Okay, and then have we thought through how to, I guess, catch like not getting the full staff list? I mean, that's just maybe concerning.
We are working through trying to figure out how to best do that. Rachel and her team with the academic pop-ins and whatnot. I think we're learning as we go, quite frankly. But we're happy to have additional discussion to see how we can improve our processes, but we are continually doing an evaluation of that.
Cool, all right, thank you. Board members, any other questions?
Just a comment. I think that, this falls out of the scope of the consent agreement, and I'm satisfied with the charter holders taking this, seriously, and so that's.
Thank you. Yeah. With that, then, is there a motion?
One real quick question,
Please.
the charter holder. Is there a nurse on staff right now?
We do not currently employ any nurses right now. No, that was specific to just initial pandemic related protocol creation.
COVID mitigation?
Yes.
All right, so I'm ready to make a motion. I move to find that the fingerprint information disclosed in the City Center for Collaborative Learning's fiscal year 2021 audit does not constitute a material failure by the charter to comply with the consent agreement. The finding is de minimis and not material to the terms and provisions of the consent agreement. Therefore, the board will not proceed to a hearing under the June 2021 consent agreement.
Second.
Thank you. Karen, please.
Vice President Close,
Aye.
Superintendent Hoffman.
Aye.
Dr. Crockett,
Aye.
Mr. Mason,
Aye.
Ms. Rice,
Aye.
Mr. Stratton. Aye. Mr. Swanson,
Aye.
President Lee.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you, everybody.
All right. Up next, we have item M, new charter application for schools opening in 23-24 by Ms. Rachel.
President Lee, Vice President Close, and Superintendent Hoffman. Each year, as part of the new charter application process, staff updates the new charter application and instructions to reflect the upcoming cycle. This year's proposed revisions primarily include technical changes to provide clarity and transparency to the instructions. Additionally, due dates have been updated to reflect the new calendar year, and standards have been adjusted in the curricular documents as is done each year. The due date for submissions has been moved up 2 weeks to provide applicants a bit more time between receiving final rubrics and the capacity interview, which will also allow additional time for the submission of an applicant's request to proceed as required by rule. The most significant change in this year's application is the manner of submission. Due to the upcoming move away from the ASBCS online platform, which we're all quite excited about, to a new improved system, the application will not be submitted through ASBCS online, but rather via a Google Drive, which is the same manner in which existing charters submit documentation for our review processes. The move to a Google Drive submission also necessitated the board including a letter of intent submission from applicants so that board staff can create and provide access to a secure Google Drive submission folder. The letter of intent will also assist board staff in the planning process for the application cycle, specifically more timely recruitment of the technical review panel members. Additionally, the move to Google Drive required board staff to add additional forms to the application. However, these forms collect information that was previously collected through the online systems application wizard and do not request anything new from applicants. Additional changes are outlined in the posted board materials and primarily include shifting criteria in the application to different sections, as was recommended by TRP members, and increasing the clarity and transparency of the instructions. All proposed changes apply to both the new charter application for traditional schools and the new charter application for applicants with an Arizona online instruction program. And I'm available to answer any questions you may have about the changes if you have any.
Great. Board members, any questions for Rachel? I don't think so. All right. We don't need to make a motion on the changes? We do, right? Okay, cool. All right, with that, then is there a motion?
I move that the board adopt the revisions to the new charter application for the 2022 application cycle for charters opening in FY 2024 and beyond, excuse me, and beyond is presented to the board today and found in the materials for today's board meeting, and direct staff to make necessary technical or formatting changes to documentation to reflect the board's action at this meeting.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Aaron, please.
Vice President Close,
Aye.
Superintendent Hoffman,
Aye.
Dr. Crockett,
Aye.
Mr. Mason. Aye. Ms. Rice,
Aye.
Mr. Stratton. Aye. Mr. Swanson.
Just some really complicated stuff, so good job keeping up with it. Gotta help those people that have to apply. So, aye.
President Lee.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously.
Great, thank you. Okay, as promised, Serena is going to join us again to be possible action to approve the ASBCS legislative participation.
Thank you, President Lee, board members. Each legislative session, legislators propose changes to statute that impact the Arizona State Board for Charter Schools and the charter schools under its portfolio. Under certain circumstances, it is in the board's best interest to sign in and speak to those bills for the purpose of providing helpful information to legislators. The 2022 legislative session began January 10th, and when I wrote this, there were 1,400 bills. When I edited it, there were 1,500, and now there are 1,600 bills filed. Of those 1,600 bills, a number of them impact charters under the board's portfolio and the board, such as one bill which would require public schools to create and post a policy around school visitation for parents and families. While these bills do not directly affect the board, should they pass, they will need to be incorporated into our processes and implemented by staff. Additionally, there is a bill that is sponsored by Representative Udall that adds accountability metrics to the existing dropout recovery program statute, including a special audit appropriation and a sunset date. DRPs are programs established by school districts and charter schools, often contracted through a provider, to assist youth that have previously left the education system in obtaining their high school diploma. The board has been aware of and working on issues related to dropout recovery programs for several years. The Department of Education and the Arizona State Board of Education have signed in support of this bill. Board staff recommends that the board vote to approve board staff to sign in on legislation for the purpose of providing information to legislators on relevant legislation that would impact the board and the board's portfolio, as well as sign in support of the Udall Dropout Recovery Program bill. And I'm available for any questions that you may have.
Board members, are there any questions for Serena about this?
President, I just want to say I'm in full support of this effort.
I agree.
Agreed.
Okay. Well, then if that is their motion.
Then I'm happy to make the
Let's
motion.
make it official.
I move based on the information contained in the board materials and presented today to approve the following statement. For the 2022 legislative session, the board supports allowing the executive director to use discretion in signing in neutral on legislation impacting the board and its operations for the purpose of providing information to legislators as to how legislation would impact the board. The board supports efforts to improve financial, operational, and academic accountability for DRPs. The board opposes efforts to expand DRPs without accountability measures and supporting data. The staff may sign in support on legislation consistent with this statement.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you.
Can I ask a clarifying question?
I don't know. Can you?
Can I have discussion after a second? What?
No,
No?
I've tried.
Yeah.
Vice President Close,
Aye.
Superintendent Hoffman.
Aye.
Dr. Crockett,
Aye.
Mr. Mason.
Aye.
Ms. Rice,
Aye.
Mr. Stratton,
Aye.
Mr. Swanson.
I'm gonna make just a comment. The way this language is written, I would hope that the board would also sign in with lack of support against a bill that does the things that we're trying to oppose. Because it only says you can sign in support of legislation consistent. I assume the writing of this would take care of that, but with that being said, I vote aye.
President Lee,
Aye,
motion passes unanimously.
thank you. All right. Ashley, close us out.
All right, well, one, I want to say sorry about the technical problems. We will get that figured out hopefully by the next board meeting. The next board meeting is March 14th. And at that meeting, it is probably gonna be a lengthy agenda. So just be ready for a long meeting. I don't know, it's gonna be a long one. So that's March 14th. In addition to that, I will be providing you an update on board members likely in the next week or so. And then also we'll provide you legislative updates as requested.
All right,
That's all I have to report.
any questions? That, and we're adjourned. Thank you.
Usually noted members of the public that stuck it out the entire time.